So pretty much everywhere you turn, you're seeing it. I guarantee you're seeing it. Disney is now in a monopoly. They own, apparently, more than half of Hollywood. Okay, so let's get into this. Might be a little bit of a longer video. So Disney is now apparently a monopoly according to many people when it comes to Hollywood and ownership of many franchises. Now, depending on how you look at this, I guess from whatever perspective you're looking at it, this can be. Just to make it clear, Disney is going to own 40% of how many films are being put out underneath what they own, which is quite a lot per year, right? That is quite a lot. But you have to think of it in a logical sense. Does Netflix have a monopoly on streaming because they're producing 800 original pieces of content next year? 800 original shows from Netflix next year. You know who's not keeping up with that? Anybody. Every other digital service combined isn't even going to do a quarter of that. But that's Netflix. You don't see anybody complain about a monopoly. Why? Because the industry is changing. The industry is changing in a major way. We saw this, you could say, way back in the late 90s. And I take this back to Warner Brothers, Time Warner, and AOL. When the rumors started circling that AOL was going to be buying them in 98, by 2000, when this all happened, think about it. Time Warner, who was not, exactly the biggest name, I mean, they were big, but they weren't like what they are today, was bought out by a company like AOL, who were at the peak because of America Online and all that. They had so much, and they acquired Time Warner, which, brought in like Bell and so many other things to them. And people weren't necessarily complaining about a monopoly back then because they rescued Warner Brothers, Time Warner. They had to. That was their thing, and that's what they did. So when you move to today's market and how it's shifting, there's a major focus on content creation and getting away from being in that locked contract, Comcast example, Time Warner, where they're like, well, we'll give you internet and TV, but you gotta bundle this if you want to save, because internet's gonna cost you $90. Or you can get internet and 50 channels for 130. Okay, why don't I just get the internet? But if you want TV separately, though, these 50 channels will cost you another 90. So you're like, oh, so I'm saving. Better bundle. You're tossing TV, tossing whatever. So they get you up there to like $200. You're like, what? You're just kind of lost. And the market has changed gradually since back in the day. And when you look at how the trends are moving, you have Hollywood. And Hollywood can't be sustained anymore the way it was going. You can't have multiple big studios and small studios, like, MGM, various other studios that used to be bigger, have had to condense because they can't keep up with the changing tide of what's happening. And what is happening is, of course, what you're seeing now. Companies are going away, companies are changing, companies are starting to be absorbed. And you just have to kind of look at Sony, for example. 5 years from now, Sony's not going to be around unless all their movies start turning major profit. Sony Films is on the way out. This is their last straw. That's where they're pushing for Spider-Man. And when you start looking at someone like Time Warner, Warner Brothers, for example, they were offered to be bought out by Fox a couple of years ago, like 5-6 years ago, and they turned it down. Fox realized they needed to buy someone because that was the future. Because Sony can't have a streaming service on their own. They don't have that infrastructure. Fox can't do it by themselves because who's going to subscribe to that, right? You're not making enough content. Once again, what's Sony going to produce? 5 shows? Like PlayStation Network? Remember Powers? What's Fox going to do? 10 shows maybe? And here comes Netflix with 800. What are you going to spend $8 on? 800 shows? 2 shows? 5 to 10 shows. Right? So herein lies the future. Disney saw this as an opportunity because, once again, Hollywood is changing. It's moving in a different direction. And a monopoly would suggest they own the majority. They're kind of steamrolling over everybody. Now, owning 40% of the movies that comes out can be hinted at that, but you have to take a step back and take a realistic step and look at it. You can only put out so many movies a year under your label. Sony, Columbia. Legendary helps and works with other people. Legendary's now going back to Universal, and they're going to be working with them, or from Universal to Warner Brothers. And things are changing, and even under this, the reason they have to go through antitrust and all that is because they're not going to be allowed to put out more than their allocation. Like Fox Searchlight, right? They're like a smaller thing, so they're able to get a couple more movies out there. But realistically, you have to have sub-companies to be able to put out more. Like example, who works with Warner Brothers? I'm not going to tell you in this video, but I can tell you Warner Brothers has a sub-company that works on other movies. Just say that some of those people came from the likes of having success over there, and they were like working on Shazam and stuff, and now they're working at a bigger head at Warner Brothers. Why? Because you have a sub-company to be able to put out more. Legally, you can't. You got like 12 to 14, depends on what they say, so you're like, another company, let's do it. So what's going to happen? Well, Disney's going to do the same thing. They're going to have to divide and kind of look at their holdings and go, well, here's what we do. So realistically, you're probably going to get one Fox superhero movie a year from next year or the year after next. So 2020, realistically, let's say, up until infinity, really. And that's because that's going to be made by Marvel, just like Spider-Man, but it's going to be put out through Fox, the company that's going to remain Fox. So the whole monopoly argument is kind of invalid when you really think about it. Fox is still going to remain. They're going to be an entity. They're just owned by Disney. Go look at Universal, Comcast, right? Multiple companies like that. Lionsgate, for example. Things are just rapidly changing in the industry. And the whole monopoly argument kind of starts to be invalid because things have just always been like this. Think about, let's go back to 1998. Time Warner acquired by AOL. So the comic industry suddenly saw a giant monopoly happen because this giant corporate, devourer of AOL just acquired the world's biggest wrestling company in WCW and the world's biggest comic book company. While Marvel was an independent comic company having to sell off their rights to even be sustained. They had to sell off characters just to be able to keep afloat, right? So that's essentially what Disney has done. They try to make their own franchises. Hey, can we make John Carter? Sure. Ooh, that bombed. What do we got at John Carter? Star Wars? Buy that. That takes care of sci-fi. We got any superheroes? We tried our own, but it didn't really work. Marvel? Buy that. So it's a game of acquisition, just like everybody's done in the history of Hollywood. Look back up into when Hollywood started and all the studios that used to be around, and even ones that were considered big in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And look at where they are now. Look at where those people went and how they've been absorbed. This isn't anything new, but it's a significant change because one of the industry giants is leaving. And people seem to forget that if Disney wanted to, they could have just stopped everything, right? They could have just said no, but Searchlight, Fox Searchlight specifically, just has a brand new contract that has to be carried out by Fox. And it was an extensive contract, so Fox Searchlight isn't going away anytime soon. It's going to stick around for the foreseeable future. And it'd be right to do so because Disney doesn't want to make wrong. And they even said, we can't get rid of, R-rated movies because there's a place for those. So we're going to keep doing those. Because it'd be illogical to buy these franchises, spend all this money, convince your shareholders it's a good idea to spend their money on and spend the company's money. They spend half of Disney's budget to acquire Fox. So do you think those people are just going to go, yeah, we're just going to burn away all of this? Of course not. So I don't think the term monopoly can really be applied anymore when Hollywood has always been a monopoly. It really has. Realistically, it's changing. It is changing, and tides are certainly shifting in a different direction. But people don't want to admit this, but in 15, 20 years from now, you're going to have 3 film studios left. After Sony is bought, it's going to either go to Universal or Warner Brothers. And then Spider-Man goes back home, obviously, that's inevitable. You're going to have a couple more studios left out there. And then you're going to see a third studio to rise and rival them. It's probably going to be the one that doesn't. And there's going to be Warner Brothers, AOL, Time Warner. There's going to be Universal, Comcast, and whoever they end up buying. And there's going to be Disney. You're going to have 3 giants. That's the next 20 years. And they're all going to have streaming services. And the ones that can't keep up, which is the rest of them, are all going to fall to the wayside. And the smaller indie ones, you're going to have your A24s and your Blumhouse and all that. Those guys aren't going anywhere. But they're going to live by the fact that they're a middle tier. And if, I have to kind of break this down for you guys. Let's go back to 15 years ago when I was growing up. I was buying a PlayStation 2 and Xbox, the original, and GameCube. Every week you go to the store, and there's your AAA title. There's your Halo 2. It's coming. But what do you have underneath that? You had tons of games. You had those B-level tiers like Matt Griffin Bounty Hunter or something like that, or Brute Force, right? Or a new JRPG every single week. On PlayStation 2, I could go get a new RPG and enjoy 100+ hours. And then what happened when we go into the PlayStation 3 era and the Xbox era? There's suddenly less of those. Then you have your games like, Blue Dragon, but it's not such a big RPG anymore. And then Final Fantasies aren't coming out yearly. They're taking years and years to develop. And now you get to this day and age, and you have your AAA titles, but where's the middle tier? Where's my generic, like, Bulletstorm style game or something like that, right? You get it once in a while, like the new game Vampire, which I love, but there's none of that B tier anymore. And that's essentially what some of these studios were. They were becoming B tier because they're getting left behind with generations. All these movie studios, like Fox, they were falling behind because they can't keep up. Getting bigger and more expensive to produce movies. And you're turning less of a profit at the end of the year because you can't keep up with the bigger guys. So you end up disappearing. So monopoly, you could say so, but as I've demonstrated for the last 13 minutes, this is how it's always been. Business as usual.